of the north. There's a greater exodus coming from the north and all the lands that Yahuwah has driven us.
Amen.
But in order to understand what's going to happen as our exiles return to the land of Israel, we have to understand the historical exodus. When we understand the historical exodus, we will understand the end time exodus. Can I get a witness?
Amen.
Amen.
Studying the fathers, our future exodus. Verse 1. Hosea chapter 11 and verse 1. When Israel was a child, then I loved him and called my son out of Mitzrayim. My son. We see that again. Hosea 11:1, Shemot 4:22 and 23. Israel is my son. When Israel was a child, I loved him and called my son out of Mitzrayim. Israel is Yahuwah's son. Yeshua is the personification of Israel as a nation, the man Israel, who is Yeshua's son. Verse 2. Hosea chapter 11 verse 2. They called them, so they went out from among them. They went out from Mitzrayim, when? In the first Exodus. Don't get hungry on me now, pay attention, or I'll ration the food. They sacrificed to Baalim, to Lord, Balaam. And they burned incense to carved images, the golden calf, Mount Sinai. All that stuff started immediately when Yahuwah's son was taken out of Mitzrayim. Today, sadly, much of Israel and the 10 tribes of the north, Ephraim, though redeemed by the blood of Yeshua, continue worshiping Baal, the Lord, in various forms. Ephraim, the 10 tribes of the north, have come out of Mitzrayim back in the Exodus, but immediately they went into pagan worship, same as it is today in various forms. Gilead 18:4 says, come out of her in the end times, Israel, my son, come out of the nations, come out of the end time Islamic beast, come out of her, my people. Verse 3. Hosea 11 and verse 3. I taught Ephraim to walk. When Yahuwah joined Ephraim to Jacob and the other tribes, he taught Ephraim how to walk in Torah. Ephraim was born in Egypt. Ephraim multiplied in Egypt. The 10 tribes proliferated in Mitzrayim, what would become the 10 tribes of the northern kingdom. And despite learning how to walk and being grafted into Jacob, their grandfather, they went and they sacrificed to lords and burned incense to images, the Easter bunny, Christmas trees, Valentine's Day, Sunday worship. It is all Ephraim learned how to walk, but they chose to burn incense to Baalim and to walk in the ways of the nations. Yahuwah said, I taught Ephraim to walk, verse 3, taking them by their arms, carrying them, but they knew not that I had healed them. They didn't walk in the healing. They didn't walk in the redemption. They didn't walk in the healing of their pendency toward paganism. Yahuwah healed them out of Egyptian idolatry. Yet they returned to Egyptian idolatry, not realizing they were to walk in their healing, and to walk in the healing without a desire to return to the nations. And that's why in Gilead 18:4, Yahuwah says, come out of her, my people. Are you with me?
Amen.
Yahuwah says, I taught them how to walk. I took them in my arms. They didn't even know that they were healed. How sad. Ephraim, today, the Torah is your road to healing. It's your road to stay out of Mitzrayim, to stay out of false worship, to stay out of religious worship. And yet Ephraim is in the church, and Ephraim is in the world, and Ephraim is in atheism, and Ephraim is in all kinds of debauchery, and they don't even know that Yeshua died to heal them and bring them back to Torah, because they are Yahuwah's son. Israel is his son. Israel is his firstborn. Verse 4, how did Yahuwah draw Ephraim out of Mitzrayim? to walk in Torah. I drew them with cords of a man. That's Moshe Rabbeinu. The cords of Ahava, love. I was to them as they who take off the yoke from their jaws when they were in slavery. I removed the yoke from their jaws, from their taskmasters. I bent down to feed them. I loved them with cords of a man, Moshe Rabbeinu, and cords of love, the Ruach HaKodesh. And they didn't even know they were healed. And they still don't know they were healed. And they don't give a holy hoot about the way to walk when Yahuwah was willing to carry us, if need be, to show Ephraim, the 10 tribes of non-Jewish Israel, how to walk. Yahuwah's desire has been and remains to remove the yoke of bondage and exile from Ephraim, the opposite of slavery. Israel's exodus on this day was to bind us to his love, not to bondage, to remove yokes of slavery and religion, to feed on the whole wheat matzah, Yeshua's body, and his Torah. Verse 5, Hosea 11:5. Let Ephraim return then to the land of Mitzrayim. Yahuwah goes, fine. You like your pagan idols? Enjoy it. I carried you. I loved you. I set you free. But you don't want the freedom. You don't want the set apartness. Amen. You don't want the Israelite lifestyle. Amen. You want to call yourself a Jew and move to Tel Aviv and shtup everything on 2 legs. But you're against plural marriage. You're against the cords of love. You're against the halakha that freed you from living like the world in Tel Aviv. Just because you're in Tel Aviv doesn't mean you're righteous. Tel Aviv is full of heathens.
They play.
To be righteous, you've got to walk the way he drew us. And stay away from the Baalim, the lords, and the bondage of this age. Amen. So let Ephraim return to Mitzrayim, Hosea 11:5. And eventually the Asherite, the Assyrian, will become his melech. Historically, in 700 BC, the Assyrians took Ephraim away. Why? Because in their hearts, they had returned to Mitzrayim. So Yahuwah sent Melech of Ashur, the king of Assyria, to take Ephraim into exile. And that's why you're in the United States today, my non-Jewish friends. You're still in the exile. Assyria took you away and you haven't returned since. Now you're in Jamaica. Now you're in St. Thomas. Now you're in the British Virgin Islands. Now you're in all the nations of Africa. Because you turned back to Mitzrayim and the Ashurite came to take you away because you didn't want Yeshua as your king. You wanted to be taught by a pastor and not by a prophet.
Come on.
You wanted to be taught by a hireling. We're going to see the only way for Ephraim to be taught. We'll see that in a second. So Assyria enslaved them due to their lacking of walking Yashar, their inward desire to return to Mitzrayim, exactly where we find Ephraim today. Can I get a witness?
Amen.
Ephraim is still chained to the slavery of this age.
Yeah.
Where's Ephraim today? A lot of Ephraimites are working.
Yeah.
A lot of Ephraimites are absent from the Kehillah. Slavery. That's slavery. You think you're free, but you're not. We live in an Egyptian system. Our hearts have turned back to Mitzrayim. We don't trust and have enough faith in Yahuwah that he will carry us. That he will carry us with cords of love. Not condemnation. Prophetic cords of love. So in our hearts and in our way and in our walk, we return to Egypt because Egypt will provide. Egypt will provide us onions. Egypt will provide us cream cheese with chive. Egypt will put food on the table. Watch it. Because the king of Assyria has you in bondage. The only Ephraimite that has to be in bondage to this world system is an Ephraimite that has turned back in their heart, relying on Pharaoh for provision and guidance and leadership and not on Yahuwah. So I'm going to be interested to see who's going to show up tomorrow. I won't be disappointed because I've been doing this for 26 years.